Hello and welcome to the Cinebums podcast. Name you just saw in the intro that right now.
You might just make it after all.
Well, yeah. Hi, this is John from the Cinebums, and as you know, Luke, Jake, and we comprise the Cinebums. And coming up, we have on the Cinebums. Look out for producer Jake is wrapping up the decade series with the Misfit Pond. That'll come out soon. Then Luke and I had a special guest on for an episode about Heat, and it was a huge deep dive in Heat with a filmmaker who Luke introduced me to, and we had a great conversation. And look out for that too. And just know that this was like, I felt like I was on the sidelines watching the Jordan and Pippen of Heat fans talk about Heat. That it was really hard to keep up with. But they did a good job of trying to make sure that I was included in their conversation. It was like I was Dickie Simpkins on the bench.
That's exactly the name I was.
Which I know
say.
everyone is thinking like, you kind of felt like a Dickie Simpkins in this episode. That is a deep cut, but yeah, look out for that. That's I'm looking forward to when that comes out too. And yeah, we've got some other episodes coming down the pipeline. But yeah, I kind of wanted to do my own show where we just talk about something specific that I find enjoyable and comforting, and it's just laid back. It's just relax and chill. We have some sleepy time tea, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I decided I wanted to do this show specifically on old TV shows. You might not know all the full history of the Cinebums podcast, but it originally started as a classic movies podcast. And it was just me in my living room, and I would sort of review classic movies. I was getting into classic film at the time. I had just taken an Alfred Hitchcock class, and I did college radio, and I had just gotten out of college and still wanted to do some sort of thing like that, and podcasts were just getting big at the time. So then I started a podcast that we had maybe 4 or 5 strong listeners. And I think I did maybe like 12 or 13 episodes of that before Luke asked if he could be a guest on the podcast. And then we did a podcast together. And then I think I've pretty much only ever done a podcast episode with Luke since then, or other guests that we've had. But it's always been at least myself and Luke on those episodes now. So yeah, I wanted to I've wanted to get back to this in a way, just because lately I've been finding myself watching some classic shows. And so these will be some like mini episodes, not as big as our regular episodes, and I'll either be by myself or have a guest, talk to Luke and Jake. And for this one, my very first guest is my wife, Carly.
Hello, everyone. I think I was also the very first guest on your original podcast.
Yeah, you might have. Yeah. I don't remember what that would have been.
Either.
What these episodes will comprise of is going over an individual show, whether it be like an old sitcom, like the one we're doing today, or maybe something like an old game show even. Because like where people talk about like their garbage TV that they watch, like 90 Day Fiancé or something like that. It's always been game shows for me. Mm-hmm. And you know that.
I do know that.
Yeah, it's always the old game shows, and we used to have like this digital antenna. We would watch Buzzer all the time that had like old Match Game 75 on it. All these old game shows on there. And also, this part of the reason I started wanting to talk about this too is on a recent episode, Luke and I got to talking about Pluto TV, and Pluto TV has a lot of those old classic show channels that are just like running constantly.
Oh yeah, you guys were talking about that you can never search for anything, so you just have to have it upon.
Yeah,
something.
Which is kind of a nice thing too. It's kind of nice to just have things on that you just pick to watch. because there's too many choices nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say I appreciate you having me on because, as you know, and this probably isn't too popular with the Cinebums audience, but I have a hard time sitting down and watching a movie. You normally have to like commit, like make sure I commit to a movie. You're like, okay, tonight, do you want to watch a movie? And then sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. But I can, rather than watching a 2-hour movie, I can sit and watch 4 episodes of a show. So for some reason, I'm a lot more engaged with TV shows.
They're more digestible. It's easier.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the affliction that
Yes.
everyone of our generation and the generation below
Yes,
have.
with the
Low attention
span,
spans. And looking in that episode too, this was our Barbenheimer analysis, where we also talked about movies we keep falling asleep to. And something that I've been trying to do is, rather than trying to start a movie late that I never finish and I fall asleep to, is maybe just watch an episode of a show, and it doesn't even.
That you also fall asleep to. Sometimes.
Yes, that I also fall asleep to sometimes. Yeah. I found comfort in watching like an old show, where I'm not really necessarily trying to follow along anything. I'm mainly watching it because I like the aesthetics of it, the look, the sets. It's just it seems a little more like lighthearted and yeah. So the first episode here, I don't even know if I might have said this in the beginning already. Well, we watched the Mary Tyler Moore Show. This was not the first time we watched the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but we're just gonna talk about like our takeaways, our impressions of this old show, how it holds up to today, the different, the design of it, the fashion, the humor, and yeah. So just sort of going through shows, maybe like one episode at a time, and yeah, and trying to cover a lot of bases, So yeah, this first one was Mary Tyler Moore Show, and I think part of the reason that we wanted to do this one to start out with is because we watched it before, and I think when Mary Tyler Moore died, I remember seeing some like clips in 2017, seeing some clips of the show and just liking the look of it. And then after Betty White died, we watched an episode together because it was one of those things, we didn't even realize she was on the show.
Yeah, people were like sharing clips and
yeah, and then we ended up just randomly watching. We were at my parents' house. It was like over the holidays that she died. Yeah, and we just watched an episode of that, and we found it funny too, which is I think a reason why I started doing the classic film route too, is that I would watch these old movies that is, as a younger person, thought that they were boring, or might be boring or lame or some uninteresting and not funny, but really a lot of the humor holds up. And so yeah, Mary Tyler Moore Show. So we watched an episode of that then.
Yeah.
And I think that's always it. We even said then, which we didn't until now. I think we said that we should watch more of this.
Yeah, and fairly recently I started watching Golden Girls, and I just really loved it. And I think one thing I love about it is that it kind of like immortalizes people who have passed away. So I kind of watched it after Betty White died, and it's just cool to see her like, not that she was ever out of her prime, but like in her element, like being just a funny lady. So yeah, I think that part of it is really cool too.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's been killing it in every decade.
Yeah, exactly.
Every decade she was around for.
So I'd love to be back for the Golden Girls episode, but
yeah,
we're here to talk Mary Tyler Moore.
But both these shows, Mary Tyler Moore and Golden Girls, I guess I would always picture like the humor in these old shows to be like grandparent humor, because it was around when our grandparents were watching like these shows. That it's not gonna have enough bite to it really to be all that entertaining. But the Golden Girls, I mean, it's a lot more crass than I thought. Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why it became so popular. But anyway, yeah, Mary Tyler Moore Show, starring Mary Tyler Moore as Mary Richards.
Yeah, that was a little confusing to me.
Well, that's what I was gonna look up before. Is I feel like there's been other shows, and maybe someone knows what I'm talking about. I feel like there's been other shows from the past. Maybe the Andy Griffith Show.
Or like
Maybe
Dick
he has a
Van
different
Dyke was his.
Dick Van Dyke. He might have. I think he had a different name, the Dick Van Dyke Show,
Right.
but it was called the Dick Van Dyke Show. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But there are some of these old shows where they're called the name of the star of the show, but it wasn't their character's name.
So the initial draw must be that they're celebrity, but then their celebrity can't live in the world that they're, you know.
I guess, yeah. It's not a.
That's if I had to guess.
Yeah. It would be weird if they made a show. It's clearly a fictional show, but they had their regular actor name.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I guess to start off, Mary Tyler Moore Show. This is from the 70s, 1970, 1977, I think. Again, like a lot of sitcoms back in the 70s and 80s, it's set in the Midwest. To appeal to just the average American family in the Midwest. I'm sure, you know, at this time too, that's like the general sort of typical American nuclear family is family in Minnesota. So it's like easier for them to like sort of relate to. And then it's funny because then you have these characters like Rhoda and Ed Asner, who kind of have these like New York accents. There's nobody with like a Minnesota accent. It's nothing like Fargo.
Think about the accent.
Where you had like they could have leaned into that more, but I guess, yeah, I didn't really, because everybody else, there's like some New York accents that come through, but then everybody else sort of has these. Like I would take these broadcasting classes in college. They would talk about how like the Iowa accent, whatever you call it, is sort of like the standard accent for like broadcasting, because it's not really like an accent. There's people in the country who have kind of a bit more of a twang. So that at least that's what they told us in Iowa in broadcast journalism class.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, in the intro, she's driving on the highway to Minneapolis,
True,
but they never, in the pilot at least, they didn't talk about where she's moving from.
Yeah, they didn't.
So that kind of implies she's moving from somewhere else. But
yeah, she's starting anew in Minneapolis. Yeah. She was in a relationship and then came to Minneapolis to start fresh.
Because he wouldn't marry her.
He wouldn't marry her. That's always the problem in these old shows.
She waited 2 years, and that's too long.
Yeah, that tends to be an issue.
Yeah.
In these relationships in these old shows, that the man is not willing to settle down and get married.
Yeah.
So yeah, and she ends up trying to get a job at a news station in Minneapolis. So basically, we didn't even say this too. We watched the pilot and then another episode of season 1.
Yeah, I think it was episode 4.
Episode 4, and I also want to circle back before we get too much into what happens in the pilot and the show, but I want to talk about this. In the very beginning, we have a iconic theme song, which even if you haven't seen the show or aren't really familiar with it, it's a theme song that I feel like has been like referenced enough in pop culture, and it's been used in commercials.
Okay.
I feel like commercials do that a lot too. Is like the Cheers theme song has totally been in beer commercials or other. They take these like TV theme songs and use them in commercials, and I think that's probably where I heard this too, because I feel like this song feels so familiar. But yeah, it's we watched another. This weekend, we actually watched another episode of an older show, The Nanny, where it's funny because the theme song goes through the whole. It's like it sets up the whole premise of the show, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but
that's another example.
That was but animated, and
so like she's down on her luck, and it's funny how like they use the theme song, which you don't see that nowadays, using the theme song to. You know, when you watch The Bear, they don't do some fun. He goes back to reconnect with his family, and they all hate each other, and they're all. and they're all really stressed the fuck out all the time.
So this one has like, it's kind of in between because it shows her driving, and then it has a lot of like quick cuts where she's wearing a cute outfit, she's walking around the city,
And it zooms into things quick,
yeah,
and it just like quick cuts through different things in Minneapolis.
yeah.
Did they have the skywalks back then? I don't know if
Oh.
you see those or not.
I
I don't.
So at the very end, she has one of those little like Scottish golfing hats, like the little beanies.
Yeah,
and
their
she
beret kind of
beret,
thing.
yeah, and she just throws it up and it's a freeze frame, and
Yeah.
she's in the crowded city.
But it's kind of a cool shot. It's like, yeah, it's you're gonna make it after all. Like that's the end. Like it's
Yeah.
she's like, that's the whole. That is. It doesn't directly explain the premise of the show like those other ones we mentioned, but it is kind of like it's about her story of like what she's doing, coming to Minneapolis to make it, and
Yeah, in the big city.
and although I feel like she might have come from. She either came from a small town or she came from like New York. Like they could have gone. It could have been one of those angles. She comes from a small town, Minnesota, to go to the city, and maybe we missed the plot point.
Yeah.
Or she's coming from a bigger city to like the Midwest. I don't know. But it's kind of cool because it's like you're gonna make it after all, like through all this, and there's like it's like bustling, these people walking by, and then in the middle of it all, there she is throwing her hat up. Yeah, and I really like it, and they do this thing. I love vintage classic fonts used in these shows too.
You're a big font guy.
Yes, as someone who does graphic design, even like old movies and stuff, why I wanted to do that for the podcast is I love the opening title sequences for a lot of these movies. I got really into Alfred Hitchcock and he uses Saul Bass for a lot of his movies. So I got really into Saul Bass at the time too. And so yeah, I kind of get design inspiration from watching these old sitcoms too, because like you always hear, there's nothing new anymore. Everything is kind of sort of recycled from the past. Everything is sort of vintage and now new, and that's just kind of the world we live in now, where I feel like we've made everything now, so everything is just sort of being recycled into something newish. Not, but yeah, we've reached a point in society where we just can't come up with anything completely new anymore. It seems like.
Just do it.
I'm sure there's something out there that I'm ignoring and being ignorant to, but the Mary Tyler Moore Show just like flashes on screen a lot, kind of like similar to Charade. You've seen that movie? Love that opening title sequence. And yeah, we love a good title sequence.
Yes,
like
we do.
that, you know. When we we get right into the show, and it starts out with this classic shot of like a suburban.
Oh yeah.
Big suburban house, which I guess she lived. It's like their apartments.
Yeah, it must be separated into different apartments.
Yeah, and we come in, and this is when.
So this must have been in a warm climate, because then they just like superimpose snow over it.
Yeah.
So this wasn't filmed in the winter in Minneapolis.
Yeah. Who knows what the exterior. Where the exterior actually was.
Yeah.
It could have been in Minnesota. They just take a still photograph of some house there.
We'll get our research team on that.
I think I want to get into sort of what happens in the show, and then we can get more into like then I want to get into like the look and like the set design and fashion, but to set up like the show Mary Tyler Moore. As I was looking into, as this is a very feminist show, they call it like the second wave of like feminism. After the was it Susan B. Anthony? Is she like the?
Like she's the voting rights lady.
Yeah, it's like kind of like that's the first wave.
Steiner, this second.
Yeah. This is like the second wave. These women that like paved the way for a lot of stuff. That were, like Mary Tyler Moore had her own show. 7 years, and it was like a big show, and it's still like really well known now, but
and it is cool because she is in the show, she's 30, she's unmarried, she moved somewhere on her own, goes to get a job, like those are her priority.
Yeah, she's a career driven single woman who right in the show, she's already getting like oogled by the men. Because I mean, Mary Tyler Moore is.
She's beautiful.
She's a fox. Yeah,
Her outfits, her hair.
Yeah,
everything.
I mean, she's just like.
She's like charming.
Yeah, yeah. It's everything about it's not just her looks, but everything. It's everything about her. She's a full package.
Her brain is also beautiful.
She's got a sharp wit. You can tell and again, I feel like the person Mary Tyler Moore was probably similar to the character.
Mm-hmm.
So you see in this first meeting with Ed Asner, she's applying for just any sort of secretary job, just getting a foot in the door here. And then after having sort of a funny back and forth banter with Ed Asner, who's kind of being a hard ass a bit, and just being he's kind of funny because his character is portrayed as just being sort of this like typical like old rump. I had a job internship interview one time where the guy started it with, "Hi John, how am I today?" That's how he started. He said, "How am I today?" And I was very confused, and I thought maybe I misheard him, so I just decided to say, "I'm doing pretty good." And he's like, "No, I said, how am I today?" That is who Ed Asner is in this scenario.
And that man, Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. No, it was not Elon Musk. Needless to say, I turned them down before they could turn me down. But yeah, he's one of those guys. You know, he gets her some coffee, and then you can see this is just clever little shot. You can see while they're talking, he below is like file cabinet. He's pouring liquor, booze, some sort of alcohol into his coffee while talking, and sort of giving her a hard time for and she's trying to be polite and respectful in this, and then ends up getting an associate producer job.
Yes, which I can only imagine that people who work in news and media seeing this must be frustrated that she got that job so easily.
Yeah.
And he said if she's willing to take less money, she could be producer.
Oh yeah, she gets paid less as an associate producer than she does as a secretary.
Yeah.
Or and then he says, or if you want $15 less an hour, you can be a producer.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says that she can only afford being an associate producer. And so it kind of sets that precedent that it's an uphill battle for her because she's a woman in this industry, and you're already quickly introduced to the people of the newsroom who are all men. I can't think of another woman that's in the newsroom. Maybe there are more that become introduced to down the road. They're all men and they're really kind of buffoons.
Yeah.
You see Ted Knight, who's the anchor, and it's kind of like he's like sort of this buffoon who is just there because he has these like classic news anchor looks and voice that he does. That there's not a whole lot going on up top.
They gave him a list of words he mispronounced from the previous show. The top one was Chicago.
Word you mispronounce? Chicago.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a big laugh.
Yep. And then Mary Tyler Moore, meanwhile, is just sharpening pencils, and she doesn't have enough to do, so she keeps breaking the pencils, so she has to resharpen them. So
yeah, this is just a comedic moment, but I don't know. For when I was watching it, I was like, this is like I feel like what the working world is like a lot of times is she's just sharpening pencils. That's her only thing, and she's done. And then she doesn't have anything else to do, so she just breaks the pencils so that she can just resharpen them. This is a great introduction to the show about this precedence of it's going to be an uphill battle for her to make it how she wants to make it, being a woman in the man's world that she's in. But the fact that that's why I feel like this show should be like celebrated more for what it did in 1970. Yeah, so that's the general basis of the show, and I would like to watch more of it to really get into because I'm sure that she grows into a bigger role at the news station from there. Yeah, and then I mean on the other side of this is her moving into her new place where she meets Rhoda, who, as we saw in the other episode that we watched, they are neighbors and become close then, and I like their relationship between the two of them. They're both very different from each other, but kind of different personalities, and where Mary Tyler Moore is more of like the straight woman, and then Rhoda is kind of the is a bit more of a loose cannon, which we also found out and had no idea until getting prepped for this episode. But there were several spin-offs for the Mary Tyler Moore show. One of them involving Rhoda, which did not do well. I think maybe got 2 seasons. And the other had to do with Lou, Ed Asner's character, which also was not very successful. Yeah. I didn't look too much into like, you know, what happens with them, but it's kind of like with, you know, when The Office, when Michael Scott left, he was carrying so much of the show that even they tried to do like a spin-off with Dwight, but he is kind of, he's not a very nuanced character. He's very specific, and has this very specific side character role that fits great with the show, just like Rhoda. So I can see how that probably didn't work, is that Rhoda is a great side character to have in this show, to sort of counteract with Mary Tyler Moore, but on her own she can't that character can't pull that same way.
It's all the chemistry.
And this is where we also get to, well, okay, we should also say Cloris Leachman is in this too. Ooh, while we're talking about foxes.
Wait, she's the
friend? Yeah,
she's the friend in the building.
Yeah. So I mean, really, the show, right away you're introduced to these women who are, you know, they're the stars of the show, and Cloris Leachman, I guess, is like the friend who lives there. Got her the apartment. She's you know, getting her like settled in and everything. Ultimately, this has to lead us to talking about the set design.
Ooh, real quick, can I stop you?
Yeah.
I just think we should say the plot of the other episode we watched, just because it's funny.
Well, yeah, we can cover it. So I mean, this is I guess this is like the humor of the show.
Yes.
Which I feel like you can see this, like you can see the show's influence on sitcoms from our time, like the 90s and 2000s, of like sort of just similar scenarios like this. So Rhoda and Mary Tyler Moore see that there's this this group for divorced people
called the Better Luck Next Time Club.
Yeah, the Better Luck Next Time Club, where they're doing a charter to Paris.
And you can get round trip tickets for $300 if you stay in the club for 6 months.
Yeah, if you stay in the club for 6 months, you get this charter flight to Paris. So they want to do that. So they pretend to be divorcees themselves in this club, and it was a funny premise for an episode. That's why we decided to watch this one. You get to see more of the dynamic between Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda, and some weird characters that and I think with some of these classic sitcoms too is like these random characters that come in that are, you know, just in a singular episode, are very over the top and hyper specific too. And it turns out in the end, spoiler, they get found out that they were lying about it, and then so, you know, they admit it to the whole group, and then it turns out everybody in the group except for like the 2 people that were running the group were also faking it just to get the chartered flights to Paris. It doesn't all necessarily have to do with her career, but so this is sort of an episode that didn't have anything to do with the newsroom or Ed Asner's character or any of that.
It's a fun side story.
Yeah, but like I said too, I like watching these because I feel like it's if you're a creative or anything, or you're in a rut, like watching things definitely helps. And I think for me, I'm drawn to this sort of style, and then sort of a more vintage, classic, like design look, and just like even just seeing like the fashion that they have, and there's like the outfits they wear, the set design, it just is all just like eye-catching and interesting to me, that I enjoy watching it just for that too. So really, in the first episode, the only two settings are her new apartment and the newsroom, which the newsroom looks like a classic old-timey newsroom.
Yeah.
You know, it's an office and everything. But her apartment then is a classic 70s shag carpet.
Yeah.
For some reason, these shows or not these shows, in this era, they just have like, it's one room, but then they have like two levels.
Yeah.
Where it's just, okay, here's a step down, and in that step down is a bookshelf.
Yes.
Because why wouldn't you? I guess if you're sitting on that step, you can reach down and get a book.
Which I love the idea of it, but she has to, like in the later episodes, she puts a step there.
Yeah, there's a step stool in there. On one side of it, there are steps that go down that are also just covered in shag carpet. This just like it just looks like dense shag.
Like stuff gets stuck in there.
Yeah, and probably hard to clean.
Yeah.
It's just for some reason in this era and I think there's a reason that they don't have it anymore, but it's just like this is one room, but there is like a step down into another room.
Real houses are just on sets of TV shows.
I feel like it's a real house. I mean, I feel like I've seen like photos from this time where there's been and there's probably been other shows like that too. I remember like the first house that I lived in. It wasn't exactly like this, but it was like we had
like a half level.
We had like a half level, where it was like, here's the living room, and then just down here where there's like an opening, and then like 3 steps down to the family room or living. Maybe this was the living room. I don't know. I loved it, but I feel like it's this era, like 70s and 80s, where you see that, probably 60s too, and then of course it's old. Vintage furniture, which there's a lot of pieces of the set design that I feel like are popular now.
Yes.
Like just the vintage aspect. Like vintage is so popular now.
Yes. Like she's a little seating area in the back. She had this really cool chair, cool table, and like I feel like it's stuff that I would look for. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I mean that's part of again why I like watching these old shows too, is for that. And I feel like our living space, while you can't really see much of it now, we kind of model it a little bit after
this set too, because in the first episode you see her like she's in her like nightgown and she's like kind of folding up her sofa bed, but is that like her permanent bed? Like we don't really see all of the aspects of the living.
Yeah.
So
it's very contained. I wonder if in the later episodes you see more more of the apartment, because really the pilot I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but it really only takes place in like 2 rooms essentially. The newsroom and then her apartment. But then we should also talk about the fashion. It looks like modern style, because like the modern style is sort of taking from older styles now, at least in the circles we're in, the people that were around a lot. I don't know, they wear more things that maybe there was a certain time in the early aughts, early 2000s, that might have been goofy to see something like that, where people are just wearing like more basic stuff, like shirts that said like my second language is sarcasm or something like that, where we just like culture was just really bad. And now I feel like culture, we're getting to a point where we're just like recycling old culture and stuff that I think is good in a way, because it's like this stuff looks like, even like with graphic design, like so much design now is borrowing from older stuff, which it's not a bad thing because it looks good.
I like that, especially Rhoda's dress in the divorce episode. I love that. Like it just a lot of like pops of color, and whereas with Golden Girls, it's because they're it's in the 80s and they're older. They're in their like 50s and 60s in that show, and it's a lot of like oversized sweaters and blazers and like muted. Okay, anyway, so it's just cool seeing the early 70s style.
Going back to like why I wanted to do this podcast too, is just like it gives me inspiration creatively to see like the old title sequences, the old set design, the fashion that they had. Like it's all, yeah. I think when I feel like I'm in like a creative rut, going back to something like this helps.
Yeah.
I guess my only other note too is like, they're not just creating a show to be a part of some movement. They created the show and it became part of the movement.
Yes, and I think too some of the more like feminist or progressive things or even things that I thought were going to be like misogynistic turned out not to be. So like when her boss comes over to her house and he's drunk and he was like, my wife's gone for a month, and she's like, oh great, that's why you hired me. And he goes, I really miss her. And then he like spends the whole time writing a letter to her about how much he misses her. So like that was a nice turn because you think, oh, he just came over to whatever. So yeah, I think not that that's feminist, but they kind of, I think, like turn around the expectation that like, oh, he's gonna take advantage of her. So yeah, I think it's, yeah, I like it a lot, and I want to see where her career goes.
Yeah.
And she turns down her ex.
Yeah, she's not gonna just fall back into the trap of being with him. She's better than him. She doesn't need it. It shows like these men as sort of like kind of these gross buffoons.
Yeah. But my wife has the best caboose.
Yeah.
That makes it better.
Yeah.
But still, that's kind of like the turn of it. Yeah.
But it's not like glossing over that these
things
don't happen. But it's like she handles it well, and she's like, oh, like we're on, like the audience is on the side of her.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if you would watch an old show. It's the men smoking cigarettes and like like pinching women's heinies or something, whatever they did back then. Pulling a
that's probably all
HW.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the Mary Tyler Moore Show. It's awesome, and I think we're gonna talk on this side show.
Yeah.
Side series. We'll talk about a lot of these classic shows, and some of them will be ones that maybe see for the first time. It'll be sort of like initial thoughts. But yeah, I want to start with one that I was somewhat familiar with, that I know that we both liked, and just sort of our takeaways from it. It's it's loose, it's chill.
It's raining.
It's raining. We're at tea. Yeah, I like a nice summer rain. So yeah, look out for more of this coming up. And again, like I said, producer Jake is wrapping up the Decade series. It's gonna be great. We got The Heat Revisited coming out. Some more episodes coming out later as well. Some more things in the work. I don't know if I even say this, but I know Luke's talking about doing his own sort of show too. So look out for that. Remember to maybe thumbs up the video.
Like and subscribe.
I hate selling, and it's not even selling. I hate self-promotion. Yeah, but you got it these days. But yeah, if you like and rate things, and we're just keeping it loose. You're gonna make it after all.